Philippines. So the headline will be Debt for Weapons as the Hunger or Poverty Surges. Our first speaker will be Kamentong Laurel, followed by Kaado Paglinawan. Let's welcome Kamentong Laurel for his opening remarks.
Good morning. It's April 12th, and we are keeping everybody updated on the major issues of the day. Of course, this week in the Philippines, it has been the kidnapping cases and the breakdown of crime, of law and order. But equally important is the ongoing global crisis emanating from the tariff war that the United States of America has launched against the entire world. So I'll read my combined paper with Rod Kapunan and some images. Trump has burst out in bluster and braggadocio, declaring tariff war on all countries and regions of the world, upsetting decades of carefully constructed mechanisms of international trade aimed at expanding global commerce, exchange, and production to uplift all, but particularly the world of a majority of developing and least developed nations. America doesn't care, never cared, and will never care for the rest of the world. That's what quote unquote America first is. America first and only. No more, no less. America wants its $37 trillion debt resolved by other nations sacrificing their balanced trade for America's sole benefit, while America continues to spend $1 trillion annually for its war machine. Trump blames every other nation for the economic and financial decay of America today, but turns a blind eye to what America did to itself, allowing capitalist America to abandon its home, to seek more profits from cheap labor from rising nations, wallowing in easy money and the quote unquote exorbitant privilege of a fiat dollar it's printed with wild abandon. China's opening up and Belt and Road Initiative. You can see the slide I prepared. I think wrong batch, the earlier batch. China's opening up and Belt and Road Initiative. In 2024, China's Belt and Road Initiative spread to 87 countries, with 72 countries experiencing construction engagement and 53 receiving investments. The Middle East surpassed Africa as the top recipient of Chinese commitments with $39 billion in commitments, while Africa received $29.2 billion in commitment. Indonesia was the largest recipient of BRI, Belt and Road Investments, followed by Saudi Arabia and Kazakhstan. So China opened to American capital that made exorbitant profits for American companies, and China delivered cheap, high-quality goods American homes enjoyed. On the meager surplus using socialist principles, China emancipated its society in record time from underdevelopment to be the largest economy speeding up front in global innovation and technology. What China did do with its surpluses from decades of quote unquote opening up and the full socialist modernization of society is plow all resources back into the development of the people and society. Education that now produces 6 times more STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics graduates than the United States. Technology investments that have produced leading technologies like 5G and DeepSeek. Unlike America that invested in its quote-unquote exorbitant privilege, unquote, of printing dollars for the wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Libya, West Asia, then Ukraine, China plowed more of its surplus into the Belt and Road Initiative, economic outreach to the world, building railways, telecommunications, power networks, roads, ports reaching 140 countries to date, encircling the world. American denialism versus China's multilateralism in BRICS Plus. China seeks to strengthen EU-ASEAN ties as US trade war escalates. America has come to the end of its rope today, and its sheer, quote-unquote, make America great again, is falling like an empty promise as it is unable to face up to the real and simple solution. Socialize American society, redistribute the $49 trillion the top 1% of Americans own to stimulate consumption and domestic manufacturing, end all wars, and save $1 trillion annually. China with the BRICS Plus, the economic partnership of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Indonesia, plus partner countries, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan, with 55% of global population and 46% of its GDP, will lead the new economic order. Together, the BRICS will see the quote-unquote community of shared future for mankind come into fruition, consolidating the global south commerce and away from US unilateralism, imperiousness, and destructiveness. Even Japan and South Korea sought counsel with China in the wake of the Trumpian trade tantrum. Philippine contradictions. Well, we featured the headline of Manila Times on the PEZA, Philippine Export Zone Authority, seeking Chinese firms to shift to the Philippines. And this is just dated March 25, 2025. The Philippines finds itself in a quandary. It's given an quote-unquote ally a 17% reciprocal tariff rate, but not the lowest 10% of Singapore. Traditionally export deficient, its only hope, the Philippines' only hope, as its Philippine Export Zone Authority boss reflects, is if China reshored its exports to the Philippines, which is highly unlikely due to the anti-China geopolitics of Bongbong Marcos. While the United States under the mercurial President Donald Trump is turning global trade upside down with his Liberation Day universal sky-high tariffs on imports from all countries, then suddenly reverses and pauses the same tariff a week later, China steadfastly steers a steady path of trade consultations with RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership partners, Japan and South Korea, with ASEAN. China has no way of going around China's dominance of the global supply chain advantage. And every country negotiation, zero tariff arrangements with the United States ultimately has to turn to one form or another of joint ventures in reshored Chinese production in the foreseeable future. The Philippines' problem is its misplaced geostrategic policies of alienation from China and domestic cost structures in energy supply, infrastructure deficiency, and labor force skill deficiencies. Digital yuan payments and de-dollarization. Well, we're highlighting this image from the on the digital RMB versus SWIFT. The emerging technology-backed disruption of cross-border payments settlement. I'm trying to recall the SWIFT. SWIFT is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. While the chaos emanates from the US alienating all its trade friends and foes alike, China continues its reliable quote-unquote opening up of its economy while continuing with its visionary leadership of the global economic community towards trade multilateralism and de-dollarization. Little notice is the People's Bank of China's operationalization of its digital RMB or yuan, connecting 10 ASEAN countries plus 6 Middle Eastern countries, including the UAE. The digital yuan payment system undercuts the US-based system for international trade transactions of payments called SWIFT, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, and bypasses 38% of the SWIFT system with a blockchain-run transaction system that warps speed settlement down to 7 seconds, cuts fees by 98%, and in a secure and open system that in SWIFT would take 3 to 5 business days, pass through several banks, and is open to US sanctions. By some estimates, about $1.2 trillion of transactions will be diverted away from the US-controlled SWIFT through this digital RMB blockchain system. Given that China is a top trading partner of 120 countries around the globe, the true quote-unquote liberation is going to come from this digital RMB or yuan system, as it helps countries and the world shed the vestiges of US dollar hegemony that has abused nations long enough with sanctions and manipulation. Our next segment is entitled Magalomania. As you can see, this cartoon is not from a Chinese newspaper or magazine, but from The Economist. Okay. The unipolar world that emerged after the demise of the 20th century US rival Soviet Union has apex today in Trump, what an American peace advocate called, actually si Jan Oberg, Magalomania. A country obsessed with its own power since the 1990s, promising to make the 21st century the quote-unquote American century. To its surprise, it did not turn out that way, as the 21st century is now turning out to be the Asian century, as the region rises with China. Few Filipinos watching the Trump trade war run amok realize that the main target of Trump's trade tariffs now is Asia and ASEAN. China is hit with the 125% tariff. That's just a few days before. Now, while China raised tariffs against the US to 84% a few days before, it's now over 140, 150%.
125.
Anyway, we'll update you on that. With a universal export ban on 7 critical rare earth minerals essential for US defense, microchip power, and other high-tech production. The US stock market plunged to a loss of $10 trillion, prompting a Trump pause on tariff for 90 days, except for China. Quote-unquote Magalomania has come face-to-face with the reality that the United States cannot have its unilateral ways anymore, or have its cake and eat it too. And the truth is, while Trump continued to brag on raising the tariff on China to 150%, we are losing count already. That is already a meaningless level. It has had to take a back foot while China gains the upper hand, consolidating and continuously expanding its market with Asia, Middle East, Latin America, and Africa. Finally, Philippine exports will depend, the Philippines will depend on China's reshoring or forms of it. The Philippines has and will continue to be an export underperformer, even with the second to the lowest tariff imposition by the Trump tariff tantrum, higher at 17% only than Singapore, which was slapped 10% tariff by Trump. That, however, doesn't matter as production cost is higher than other ASEAN countries in the Philippines, starting with electricity, which is 30% higher than Thailand, 50% higher than Vietnam, and 60 to 70% higher than China. The current Philippine foreign policy positioning also prevents it from taking advantage of the lower US tariff on it compared to the 49% for Cambodia, 46% for Vietnam, 36% for Thailand, 32% for Indonesia, and 24% for Malaysia. But even the Philippine Export Processing Zone authorities are hoping for Chinese reshoring to the Philippines to circumvent the US Trump tariff wall will be frustrated by the government's anti-China policy. The quote-unquote Magalomaniacs will have no choice but to settle down and negotiate with China after a month or two as the US dollar crash deepens due to the flight from the dollar created by the uncertainty of US assets for investors. Inflation skyrockets in the US as Nike says, they may move production out of China but to India as US costs are too high. And cell phone prices and pharmaceuticals rise 50 to 100% due to irreplaceable components from China and Asia, etc. Trump is known to relent when cornered. He is likely relenting on the attack on Iran. He is relenting on the Ukraine war. There's a 50-50 chance he will relent on the trade war with China. Otherwise, the world should prepare for a kinetic world war a la World War I and World War II. And the latest is, of course, this is from the New York Times itself, saying that in a storm of tariffs, many companies see China as the safest harbor. At the same time, just this morning, we had indications that Trump has expressed interest in opening talks with China, but we are waiting for more confirmation on this. So I think we can open to questions if there are any.
Thank you, Kamentong Laurel, for enlightening us on the effects of Trump's trade war on the global economy. If you have any questions or reactions to the opening statement of Kamentong, please send them to Zoom. If you're in the Zoom on Facebook Live and in YouTube Live, we'll try to get through these as many of these as we can. Let's try to get through some of them before we get to Kado's opening remarks.
Yeah, Chris.
Sir, question lang. Ano ang direktang epekto ng trade war on tariff na pinatupad dito ng Trump's Philippines?
Well, we had feedback from, for example, Jollibee, na maraming branches sa Estados Unidos. Ang immediate effect is the inflation sa Estados Unidos, which will affect the bottom line of Jollibee, for example, in the United States. So, diliit ang tubo nila, which puts their operations in difficulty. That's only one. The other that has expressed its sentiment on this tariff war ni Trump is Del Monte Philippines, which has said that it will affect their exports to the United States. Ang problema, as I explained in my paper with Rod Kapunan, is that even before this trade war ni Trump, mahina na ang export natin. We've had a trade deficit for many years now, and it has been growing the past year. So may internal problems pa rin ng Pilipinas. At the same time, wala naman tayong maipoproduce to replace what the United States is buying from other Asian countries and from China. Ang pinakamataas na exports natin to the United States are electrical harness, electronic components, and so on, which are basically assembly dito sa Pilipinas. And higher tariffs will mean that the Americans will reconsider. And these are the easier things to do inside the United States. So, mas malaki ang peligro sa Pilipinas kaysa anumang promeso na ating narinig na napapaliwanag ng ilang mga government officials. But I think a realistic and practical view is expressed by the PESA chief na dahil dito sa 17% tariff at kung ma-renegotiate na mas mababa, eh magkakaroon ng advantage ang Pilipinas kung ang mga kumpanya sa China, including American companies in China, transfer to the Philippines to export to the United States. It depends a lot in the next 2 months dahil po yun ang window or 90 days pa na, 3 months. No? Dahil yun ang window ni Trump for renegotiating with 50 countries. Dahil sabi po niya ngayon, may 50 mga bansa na daw ang siyang kumakatok sa pinto niya. And I don't know if he really said this, but it's being quoted that to kiss my ass. It's talagang pang-i-insulto ginagawa ni Trump. And people won't like it. But yes.
We have a question here. Some people say na kasi bumaba yung value ng Chinese yuan, the currency of China. China's yuan falls the weakest not seen in 18 years since 2007. Is this good for the Chinese that the value of their yuan has fallen?
Yeah, definitely. Kasi po, kung bumababa ang valor ng isang bansa, ng pera ng isang bansa, napapamura ang kanyang exports kung bibili ng ibang mga bansa. So, of course, this is interpreted by some as a direct action of the Chinese government to match the tariff war ni Trump. While on the other side naman, the US dollar is devaluing not because of deliberate action but because of the uncertainties connected to the American economy. Dahil po nag-hold back ang mga investors sa American Treasury bills and so on. Kaya biglang nag-turn around si Trump within a few hours nung nakikita niya yung nangyayari sa US dollar at yung impact sa Treasury bills at pagtaas ng rates sa US bonds. No? Kasi nag-withdraw ang mga tao sa stock market at bumibili ng US bonds na mas long term for safety. So, in that aspect talagang napa-atras si Trump. Pero siyempre, sa pagbibida ni Trump, yun kanyang ginawa para mabigyan ng pagkakataon for the negotiation. Whatever the intention, it's good that Trump relented and is backing down and opening negotiations with at least 50 countries now. But let us keep in mind that the bargaining will be very hard. Vietnam has offered zero tariff to the United States already. Reciprocally, ni-reject din yan ng Estados Unidos. So ang isang crucial na sektor, isang crucial na region dito sa mga negotiations ay European Union. Kasi this is a balancing factor dito sa trade war between the United States, which Trump started, and China. At kung saan pumanig ang European Union, yun malamang ang makakatamo ng malaking advantage dito sa trade war na to. So, in the meantime, actually, walang panalo ang Estados Unidos the next 2 years. At least the next 2 years. Dahil po, unang-una, yung price increases are already happening sa loob ng Estados Unidos. At ang mga small businesses ng Amerika, na daan-daang libo, kung di milyon ng mga small businesses, ay tinatamaan na po dahil sa pagpigil po ng imports galing sa China. Dahil yung mga gumagawa ng mga toys, mga signage lang, mga manika, kung ano mga maliliit na bagay by American small business is already facing 50-100% increase in their import costs. Marami mang nagpaplano na magsara, nabigyan lang ng breathing spell nitong 90 days negotiations period. Kasi ang gagawin naman ng mga Vietnam na maraming mga kumpanya galing sa China na nagkumagawa sa loob ng Vietnam at nag-export sa US, magre-readjust lang yan ng kanilang mga tubo with regards to their exports to the US. Because there is no replacement for the low cost of Chinese supply chain today. And it will take the United States, for example, dun sa mineral export ban ng China for 7 major minerals. It'll take the United States 2 to 3 years at the minimum, but possibly 5 years or 7 before they can replace Chinese imports, minerals, and many of the other components. So, nasagot ko ba yung tanong?
Thank you. Okay. Try to get to one more and then we'll circle back later. Okay, there's one question here from Dorinia Rojas from YouTube. Please enlighten us more on the behavior of the stock market in light of the recent events, since the mainstream media has been deaf and mute about it. So I think what's being asked here is what the behavior of the stock market in light of the Trump trade war. Is it normal? Should we be concerned?
Well, talagang it was a crash, no, that people were comparing to the 1930s crash sa United States, no? That preceded the Great Depression. Kaya within ilang oras lang, pumihit na si Trump, at nagdeklara ng 90-day pause dito sa trade tariff na to. Kasi posible na at that point na bumagsak ang American economy to the Great Depression level. In 2 days or 3 days ba yun? From 5 to 10 trillion ang binagsak ng US stock market. And that is a huge amount even by American standards. Medyo naka-recover nung pause ni Trump, pero bumagsak na naman po from the latest updating I took dito sa stock market. Bakit nag-withdraw sa stock market ang mga American investors and investors in American stocks? Kasi natakot sila na lalong babagsak ang kanilang investments as the tariff war pressurizes the American economy with inflation, disruption of trade and commerce within America, at sa political opposition din na umangat or tumaas in the aftermath of the announcement of the preposterously high tariff levels ni Trump. Okay.
Thank you, Kamentong. Okay. Next will be Kaado Paglinawan. We'll talk about the sale of the US-20 F-16 fighter jets. I think he will enlighten us on how it is really a highway robbery. Again, if you have any questions, please send them live. We'll try to get through them when Kado is done speaking in YouTube, Facebook, and Zoom.
Good morning to all of you. In 2018, 3 American cabinet secretaries wrote a letter to President Rodrigo Duterte offering F-16s and other war materiel. The former president told Mike Pompeo of the State Department, Wilbur Ross of the Commerce Department, and Jim Mathis of Defense, we do not need any F-16s. Our military does not need this kind of fighter jets because the Philippines is not at war with any country. Former Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana seconded and declined the sale, saying, we need aircrafts for dual civilian, and military use, affected by many natural calamities every year. We need helicopters more for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief on top of our use against terrorists. The Americans reiterated the offer for F-16 fighter jets when Lorenzana visited Washington, D.C. in 2021 after the pandemic, but he thumbed down the U.S. offer as being too pricey and beyond our means. What we in the Asian Century Institute found out 2 weeks ago from the U.S. Air Force technology is after faking false starts in the South China Seas beyond our 12 nautical territorial seas with the use of our civilian vessels in the Coast Guard on the narrative that China is our enemy since February 2, 2023, the Marcos Jr. administration has requested 16 F-16C Block 70-72 aircraft and 4 F-16D Block 70-72 aircraft and a list of associated equipment from the United States. All told, $5.58 billion in freaking US dollars for 20 F-16 Falcons or Vipers that are otherwise bound for the boneyard as the US replaces them with F-35 Lightnings in their fleet. The same money can already buy 93 JAS-39 Gripens from Sweden, 159 FA-50 Eagles from South Korea, 223 JF-17 Thunders from Pakistan. More interestingly, 48 or 28 more fifth generation brand new F-35 Lightnings that we don't have approval by the US State Department. The F-35 Lightnings, of course, is fifth generation, while the F-16 is fourth generation. $279 million per F-16, while only $115 million per F-35. F-16 is a 50-year-old technology. While its airframe can last 40 years of operations, a continuing challenge is the availability of spare parts and access to upgrades because there are approximately more than 3,000 fighting Falcons and Vipers in operation globally across 25 countries. Therefore, we will be in competition with 25 other countries in servicing more than 3,000 F-16 that is still in operation. This is on top of the mind conditioning the public that we are in the market for a Typhoon weapon system, which launches Tomahawk offensive missiles that can carry nuclear weapons and has a range of 2,500 kilometers. That is a violation of 2 ASEAN treaties for neutrality and non-nuclear proliferation, which I doubt if this administration is aware of, but I am sure the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Enrique Manalo, knows about this. It turns out U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's recent trip to the Philippines was actually a marketing mission for Lockheed Martin, a preferred supplier for a deep state arsenal. Upon its return to Washington, D.C., the U.S. State Department approved a prospective sale of these 20 F-16 aircraft to the Philippines as part of a larger package that includes hundreds of medium-range air-to-air missile bombs, anti-aircraft guns, and heavy ammunition. En route to the Philippines, while on a workout, Pete Hegseth was seen wearing this tattoo spotted on his recent workout in Hawaii that features the Arabic word kafir, which translates to disbeliever or infidel. Many Muslims view the term as derogatory, and critics say that the tattoo symbolizes an open declaration of hostility towards Islam. To buffer the impact of its absurdity, Romeo Browner, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, blew an alarm to our Northern Luzon Command, declaring, as members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, quote, "We should have that mentality that we are already at war," unquote. Assumably ordered by Hegseth to blow a false whistle, General Browner even tried to blend the shallow and irrelevant dressing of rescuing our 250,000 overseas Filipino workers in the event of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, a responsibility that belongs to the Department of Migrant Workers and the Manila Economic and Cultural Office in the island. This megaphone technique by Browner was so obnoxious, no less than the executive secretary had to intervene to issue a subtle caveat that the president had nothing to do with this loudmouth, and he thereby issued a policy statement, a power reserved to the presidency as chief architect of our foreign affairs. The Philippines' top columnist, former Ambassador Rigoberto Ticlang, wrote, "The Marcos plan to purchase 20 F-16 fighter jets for 5.58 billion, including the necessary armaments such as air-to-air missile, is foolish. It's a foolish one. Tinawag niya itong hair-brained idea o galing sa utak ng isang kuneho. 20 F-16 fourth-generation jets of vintage 1970s are no deterrent to China. To China's fifth and sixth generation fighters developed in the 1990s and in the recent 2000s. Ticlau added, we will never go to war with China, for which the jets are supposedly needed for, and if we did, those jets will be obliterated a few minutes after they take off. China has 3,300 fighter jets, 700 Dongfeng 21 and 26 medium and intermediate range missiles that could reach anywhere and beyond the Philippines. I would like to add that Chinese Dongfeng 17 hypersonic missiles with speeds up to Mach 10, that is 10 times the speed of sound, can obliterate any target in the Philippines within 50 seconds when launched from close-by submarines in the South China Sea in the west or the Pacific Ocean on the east. 50 seconds. Tomahawks have a maximum speed of only 920 kilometers per hour, which is not even on the speed of sound. It is subsonic. F-16s can reach Mach 2 or twice the speed of sound, but only has a range of 2,300 kilometers round trip. So why project the F-16? Tiglao offers two hypotheses. First, the Typhoon and the F-16 sale to the Philippines reveals that the U.S. demonization of China and its stoking of Asia's fears towards the rising superpower isn't just for some abstract ideological reason, nor for hegemonic power. It exposes American military-industrial complex's business aim to boost Lockheed Martin's revenues to shore up the U.S. economy. On top of this, we do not have a comprehensive and missile defense system. China's hypersonic could reach the Typhoon location and F-16 hangars in matters of less than a minute. The U.S., in fact, is cruelly setting up these 20 jets as the first targets of Chinese weapons in case of a conflict in the South China Sea and Taiwan. And internationally, this could be perfectly legal in international law, following the concept of preemptive defensive strike. Second, it is naive to think that the Lockheed Martin sales do not have commissions that turn out even in the very circuitous ways, ending up in the pockets of signing authorities, which in this case would be Marcos himself or probably his defense secretary. Or if I may add, Browner and Ambassador Babes Romualdez, who are softening the field for a home run for their comfortable retirements. Tiglao said commissions could theoretically be 56 to 279 million US dollars through the foreign military sales program's 3.5% surcharge, or on the average 195 million, being the only confirmed fee outside of any other under-the-table concessions. That's a whopping 11 to 15 billion Philippine pesos shared by four pockets. That is, if House Speaker Martin Romualdez is excluded. Tiglao's advice: spend the 5.6 billion instead to strengthen our fortifications at the islands we occupy in the Spratlys and station battle-ready, well-armed battalions there to defend these from invaders, may they be Chinese, Vietnamese, or even Taiwanese. By transport planes to quickly send reinforcement. That is, if we have 5.6 billion at all. But these transactions with the United States is run by foreign military financing that can go up to 30 years, impoverishing our incoming generations. The world celebrated with candidate Donald Trump as he began his second term as U.S. President and appeared tough at chanting world peace and destroying the reputation of some of the warmongers who walked with him during his first term. On March last year, during the campaign, he said, "I am your justice, and for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. The deep state must and will be brought to heel. I will shatter the deep state." But merely 3 months into his administration, next slide please, it seems that what Trump meant deep state is not the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower strongly warned America about, but his pejorative term for those he sees as corrupted and who have weaponized the government against him, such as the FBI and the Justice Department. And actually, as things started to unfold, the US president has only feigned leaving the North Atlantic Treaty Organization leadership to Europe, but has no intentions of distancing from allies. The fundamental logic of US defense strategy remains unchanged, achieving strategic objectives through exploitation of and arms sales to its allies, doublespeak and manipulation, and expansion of its forwarding operation base. What the US is doing is spending less in Ukraine and asking Europe to jack up their defense spending up to a whooping 5% of their GDP to absorb the war. More than double the alliance's current spending target, a matter that's causing consternation among Europe's cash-strapped governments. The suggestion, of course, is that much of that will go to purchases from the US military-industrial complex. In the Indo-Pacific, Trump has dodged the question of US military commitment over Taiwan until Washington Post headline, Secret Pentagon Memo on China, Homeland has heritage fingerprints. The internal guidance memo that bears the fingerprints of Conservative Heritage Foundation included verbatim text published by the think tank last year reorienting the US military to prioritize deterring China's seizure of Taiwan and shoring up homeland defense by assuming risk in Europe and other parts of the world. The document entitled Interim National Defense Strategic Guidance, with secret or no foreign national stamps in most passages, was distributed throughout the defense government in mid-March and signed by Hegseth before he came to East Asia. The memo reaffirms the position that the US has identified comprehensive strategic competition with China as an enduring core agenda regarding China's principal challenge to its global dominance. Today, we get a sense of Washington's real intent. Assert China as Pentagon's sole pacing threat and denial of a Chinese fait accompli seizure of Taiwan, while simultaneously defending the US homeland, is the department's sole pacing scenario, while leaving the threat from Moscow largely attended by European allies. Responding to Heritage Foundation's analysis, Suo Hua, an international affairs expert at Beijing Foreign Studies University, said, such an extreme policy direction represents only the ideology of a small number of extreme conservative force and interest of the military-industrial complex, which will be opposed by other interest groups. For the secessionist DPP Taiwan authorities, the US posture is not something to be happy about, as pressuring Taiwan to increase the military spending and purchase US military equipment is essentially forcing it to pay a protection fee that Washington is unlikely to honor. Which brings us to the question, if we are to join the arms race, then what good is the Mutual Defense Treaty? the 9 sites of the U.S. EDCA bases, and the visiting force agreement we have with the United States under a supposedly but vague ironclad commitment. Japan bombed the Philippines on December 8, 1941, just hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, targeting American air bases and military installations, including Clark Field. But to demolish the notion that China is an enemy of the Philippines, at the time there were 1,000 Chinese Filipino troops under the Philippine Commonwealth Army under U.S. supervision. On top of that, as early as May 1942, or 4 months after General Masaharu Homa landed his infantry in Lingayen, formerly occupying the Philippines, Chinese immigrants joined Filipino guerrillas or formed their own units. One was known as the Ampao unit led by Colonel Chua Si Tiao, which started a subunit by Marcos Marking Agustin and Valeria Ye Panlillo of the Markings guerrillas, who posed as street vendors in Manila selling puffed rice snacks, gathering intelligence for the guerrillas. But the more famous was the Wachi Division of the 48th Squadron of the National Revolutionary Army, also known as the Philippine Chinese Anti-Japanese Guerrilla Forces, who saw action from Nueva Ecija all the way down to Bicol. They coordinated their operations with the U.S. Armed Forces in the Far East, the USAFE, and the Hukbalahap, towards the liberation with the 1st Cavalry Division of the U.S. Army, the Philippine Commonwealth Army, and the Philippine Constabulary in 1945. A monument in their honor has been erected inside the Chinese cemetery beside La Loma in Manila. Although we did not experience a nuclear bomb, estimates range from 527,000 to 1 million Filipinos died during the Japanese occupation, with about 150 of them due to war crimes. On the other hand, outside of military combatants, only approximately 672 Japanese civilians died, mostly due to American air raids, including 200,000 in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In terms of combatants, 57,000 Filipinos and 2.1 million Japanese were killed, but only 407,000 Americans died, with a significant majority of those deaths occurring in the European theater. The combined $6 billion for Typhoon, Tomahawks, and 516s translates to $360 billion that can arrest the increasing hunger rate of 27.2% of our population that has been experienced last March. It can boost our food security through a radical re-engineering of our agricultural system to a higher yield, new farming techniques, and more jobs, better economies of scale for lower prices in the market. I have an article entitled Waste Philippine Seas. Why? Because we have a Fisheries Administration Order 263 on February 9, 2019. The objective of the policy is to establish fishing maritime areas and provide science-based participatory and transparent governance framework and mechanism to sustainably manage fisheries and aquatic areas. Instead of spending millions a day sending our Coast Guard to challenge Chinese vessels in high seas, way beyond our 12 nautical mile territorial seas, we should use the funds our PCG is wasting onto establishing a modern fishing industry with deep sea capability. The Philippines has the 5th longest coastline in the world, stretching over 36,000 kilometers, which is not merely a scenic feature for tourists. It is a vital resource supporting diverse ecosystems, including mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrass beds, which are crucial for fisheries and biodiversity, contributing to the country's food production. The FMAs, or the Fishing Maritime Areas, were established in 2019, and it was truncated by the COVID pandemic when we were about to lobby for a Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources separate from the Department of Agriculture in order to master this vast resource. Unfortunately, the Marcos administration, I think, has not even heard of it. But significantly, 60% of our people live along these coastlines, which explains why many of our poorest of the poor are fisherfolk. While the coastline offers immense potential, in contrast, the arable land are suitable for cultivation, which is a more limited resource. We have only a total land area of 30 million hectares, with about 50% classified as agricultural land, primarily for rice, corn, and coconut. We stand a better opportunity looking towards the sea rather than insisting on land development only. The disparity between the vast coastline and the limited arable land present both challenges and opportunities for the Philippines. The challenges include ensuring food security and sustainable land management, while opportunities lie in harnessing the potential of the coastal resources for economic development, food production, packaging, and export. Besides cutting on imports, a newfangled revolution is harnessing our food resources that can help diversify and boost our exports. Google, artificial intelligence says, in the past 2 years, the Philippine exports to the United States have increased with an external trade in goods. Wow! By 0.4% in February 2025. 0.4%, not even 1%, with the US remaining as the highest contributor to the total export value. But if we fact check this with the Philippine Statistics Authority, we get a confirmation. And in this chart, we see, at first glance, the US and Japan are toe-to-toe in the lead. Given a nominal 0.4 increase in our exports to the US, factor in Trump's 17% tariff imposed on us last week. I ask you, will the US imports from the Philippines go up or down? But have you noticed how the chart separated Hong Kong from China? Even our statisticians are cheating the people. Pagdating sa exports, nakahiwalay ang Hong Kong sa China. Pagdating sa imports, wala namang nakahiwalay. So if you add the two, it will sum up to 1.520 or 154% higher than US or Japan. No need to be a rocket scientist. China remains to be the gateway to enhance Philippine trade, given its vast population of 1.4 million and 140 countries that have joined the Belt and Road Initiative, which would be our subsidiary or supplementary markets. Unfortunately, we are not part of the BRI. We are not part even of the BRICS. In conclusion, our present dalliance with the Americans ridiculously typecast the Chinese as an enemy. But neither can I accept, as epic Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy and the great American Mark Twain denied, that the United States is a force for good in this country. Tolstoy wondered how countless atrocities could be committed in the name of civilization. Even in the standard historiographies of the Philippines, the Philippine-American War that engaged in genocide was skipped in favor of highlighting the material improvements under American tutelage. On an even keel, next slide please, Twain condemned American policy in the Philippines, particularly regarding the actions of the US military and their massacre of Filipinos, seeking not to liberate the people, but rather to subjugate them. He saw US actions not only in violation of human rights, but a betrayal of the ideals of American democracy. Between 1898 and 1902, an estimated 200,000 Filipino civilians died as a result of atrocities in the Philippine-American War. In addition to the civilian casualties, approximately 20,000 Filipino combatants were killed in action. The perpetrators were only was only cost the death of their own 4,200 US soldiers. With this contrast, ladies and gentlemen, I submit this paper for your consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gado. Let us now entertain some of the questions that raised by the audience in the Zoom Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. We're going to shift to a more open discussion. Please send in your questions. We'll try our best to get to all of them.
Meron bang questions? Which one? Can you see?
Do we have any questions sent to us via Zoom?
Yung sa Zoom, yung ating mga...
Wala.
Walang masyado sa Zoom.
Just check here in YouTube.
Yung ating provincial reactors, wala pang mapasok. Okay, anyway, discussion tayo. So I think it was very important and helpful that Kaado focused on where investments in development of the seas surrounding the Philippines should be going to, instead of this constant hammering at the waste Philippine Sea projects of the Americans and Tariela and Company. That's one. But also I wanted to bring up the alternative investments in defense, security, and productivity from drones. Instead of fighter planes that are 100 times more expensive, 1,000 times more expensive than drones. In our previous discussion elsewhere, I brought up these reports. In fact, in the discussion this morning at my program on DZRJ, I showed the reactions of, let's say, the Ukrainian soldiers to the drone warfare in Ukraine. They have said that sabi nila that drones have changed the nature of warfare. Yet, itong sina Browner are still pushing for F-16s, outdated F-16s.
Okay.
So, malinaw po may anggulo po rito na hindi po nakakatulong sa bayan, no? Yung nabanggit ni Kaado na commissions that are involved in all these transactions. But what steps can we take to stop these F-16s? Except to change the government from BBM back to Duterte, who had made a very logical, rational, judicious decision on the matter than when the F-16s were offered during his term. Do you have any?
And so far as that is concerned, I think this administration has been consistently trying to flush itself down the drain. Because as of last survey of Publicus, the 14% trust rating of the president has already been trashed down by 63% distrust, which means that if the 63% distrust is deducted, that is negative, no? And if it's deducted from the 14% trust rating, you will see that the net trust rating of this president is negative 49. It is even lower than Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's term, lower than Noynoy Aquino's term. And I predict that with all this recklessness that this government has been committing, it will further go down. As to whether the Filipino people can still absorb this intellectually and emotionally and not go into some kind of a descent with more determination as in a people power, I have no way of gauging. But it seems in the same survey, the pro-sentiment for the administration has also been reduced to 15%. And so theoretically, 85% of this country is against this administration. While watching Sasso Rogando Sasson's video last night, she even came up with statistical proof that this administration, especially Congress, is guilty of premeditated, pre-planned, and shameless corruption. Why? Because of the record padding of the budgets of both houses of Congress, which in the past administrations have been almost at zero as they pass through the bicameral committee. But Sas Rogando submitted statistics that if, for instance, to simplify matters for layman's understanding, the proposed budget for the House of Representatives is 10, and the proposed budget for the Senate, it will be 10 plus 11 divided by 2 would be about 10.5. But what has come out of the bicameral committee, instead of 10.5, 11 plus 10 divided by 2 is 10 plus 11. 21. For 3 successive budgeting processes, that for 2023, 2024, and 2025. Instead of averaging and reconciling it, they added A plus B equals C. And it has been consistent under the leadership of Martin Romualdez. So this, in addition to the information we have shared with you over the wanton wastefulness of this administration when it comes to money and its obvious lack of achievement, will already show you that the demise, the political demise of this administration is long overdue. But we can only submit it to the people, Capento. We can only appeal to those who have consciences in the armed forces of the Philippines to do their mandate of protecting the people and the state. If this goes on for another year, I think it will lead to the collapse of our economy. Not slow, but rapidly. Because they will not stop at 2026, they will not stop at 2027, and they will not stop at 2028. So we will have 5 years or 6 years of bloated budgets under this administration if we don't stop it now. That is the clear and present danger that this republic is facing politically and economically. On top of this, we have seen how the fingers of Malacanang seems to be all over the place, hopefully not in the judiciary. But in the executive and legislative, we see a collaboration of corruption going on, and even in the violation of basic human rights. The recent hearings of Jaime Marcos' Committee on Foreign Affairs have undergone 2 major hearings, the first and the third. And it seems that even the Committee on Foreign Affairs in the Senate does not have the full cooperation of its Senate President. And many people have called me for the past 2 days saying, asan ba talaga itong si Chis Escudero? And I can only tell them that when Lisa Araneta Marcos wanted to lobby Trump in Florida and went to Los Angeles, Chis Escudero and Jinggoy Estrada flew to Los Angeles to have dinner with Lisa Araneta Marcos. I don't have any proof, but I think the succession, if Sara Duterte is convicted on the impeachment case forthcoming to start in July, as the Senate President is saying, that I think it will be safe to assume that if they are successful in railroading that, Chis Escudero will be the next Vice President and Jinggoy Estrada will be the next Speaker, the next Senate President. If you know where that leads to, that is, if Jinggoy Estrada does not go to jail ahead of time, then where is this country for? These are questions that are now going not only in social media, but in the marketplaces throughout Metro Manila.
Any other questions? Now let's proceed to the next topic. Spy versus spy and kidnapping. Balik tayo.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Dito ka.
We come back again to Kamentong Laurel to give us a breakdown of national order in recent events with stories and news reports of alleged Chinese and caught Chinese spies in the Philippines, and also the recent kidnappings that have been happening in the country of affecting the Chinoy community.
Okay, magandang umaga ulit. At itong ating paper, hindi pa po na-publish ito sa ating website ng Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies dahil po ito ay hinabol lang po this morning. At the edited version can be published by tomorrow afternoon, Sunday afternoon po sa ating website or Monday morning. But I will read what I had prepared for this to updated with the kidnappings, because originally this was just about the spy versus spy, meaning the recent arrest of 3 Filipino nationals on suspicion of espionage in Hainan, China. But with the updating now, that proceeds from the explosion of news and discussions on the spate of kidnappings that is reminiscent of the 1990s kidnappings during the time of President Estrada. Okay. For months now, the Filipino-Chinese community had been spreading murmurs of spreading criminality against Filipino-Chinese citizens as well as Chinese nationals in the Philippines. Then suddenly this recent month, the news of brazen kidnappings burst out into the open. And as you can see in our first slide, the protest of the former president, the recent president of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Cecilio Pedro, reporting that from January up to today, there have been at least 12 kidnapping cases, including the recent one. Out of the 12, 10 of them were Chinese, the 2 others were foreigners. This in light of the blatant, farcical and distorted reports from PNP Chief Marbil that criminality is going down. This was preceded recently by the shocking news of 3 Filipino nationals arrested on suspicion of espionage in China. So we can see the reports about this, including the identities have been reported. However, this development should not come as a surprise, as the Philippine government, through several of its political and security branches, had for 2 years been conducting a hybrid information warfare, quote-unquote, witch hunt in support of semi-declared campaign to, quote-unquote, exact a reputational cost to China, initiated by the United States in a complex coordinated operation that includes the so-called maritime transparency, quote-unquote, assertive transparency operation, with operations in the political and security institutions against targets that can be associated with Chinese presence in the Philippines. So the next slide will show the very complex beginnings of this campaign to slander China, to sabotage Philippine-China relations, to implant an anti-China sentiment among the population, among the Filipino people, We have to go back to 2023 when the Americans, through Colonel Raymond Powell, introduced the idea of an assertive transparency strategy to the strat-based ADRI Filipino think tank group associated with the late and former Foreign Secretary of the Philippines, Alberto Del Rosario, who started the tensions and conflicts in the Scarborough in 2012, starting with the standoff at the Scarborough Shoal, and subsequently followed by the filing of the arbitration case against on the West Philippine Sea issue with The Hague. So this is a long-term strategy of the Americans using its local proxies, particularly, I repeat, the Albert Del Rosario Institute Strat Base. And these operations inserted itself in the political and security institutions such as the Congress, the Senate, the NBI, National Bureau of Investigation, the Philippine Coast Guard, of course, very well-known operations of the Tariela group in the Philippine Coast Guard. This is just a reminder that through the course of the past 2 years, particularly in 2023, the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute reported on this and was the first and probably the only one that highlighted the public admission and announcement of the United States of America military establishment and community that it intended to establish the forward operating base Sierra Madre in the Ayungin Shoals, or the Ayungin Shoals. So despite the denials of the Philippine side, the Americans have blatantly announced this its intention to use the BRP Sierra Madre as the beginnings of a forward operating base in the South China Sea against China. Below is Raymond Powell, beside Tariela, who have been working in close collaboration to the point that Tariela has been identified as a cohort of Raymond Powell, as a echo chamber for Raymond Powell. So here is a quote directly from Raymond Powell, who is a U.S. maritime security expert, and said that with China being seen, that is what their intention is, as ramping up its aggression in the contested waters of the South China Sea. Now is the time for Washington and Manila to determine what can be considered an attack on public vessel, trying to push the Mutual Defense Treaty to be invoked to create a war between the Philippines and China, as well as how to respond accordingly to the recent intensified actions of Chinese government in the conflicting island and maritime claims in the region. And this is December 17, 2023. All this tension started in February 2023, so this is around 8 months later, when interventions from various peace-loving Filipino entities, such as President Bongbong Marcos himself in November of 2023, intervening with President Xi Jinping in San Francisco at the APEC meeting there, requesting for a sideline discussion with President Xi Jinping and requesting for a de-escalation. This is the response of Raymond Powell. The Philippines and the US are going to have to start some very direct conversations about what constitutes an armed attack on the public vessel, and make sure they communicate clearly to Beijing how close China is coming to triggering far more serious consequences and so on. In other words, Raymond Powell, in the succeeding months, tried to intervene in the efforts to de-escalate. In January of 2024. Efforts were made by Philippine Coast Guard Commodore Alberto Carlos, to de-escalate and succeeded in conducting the first flawless rotation and resupply mission to the Ayungin Shoal BRP Sierra Madre in February of 2024, which again, Raymond Powell and Tariela, a month later, interrupted and said that the assertive transparency will continue. So the entire 2023 was dominated by the political operations to disrupt Philippine-China relations. The next slide begins our discussion on this. Simultaneous initiatives were undertaken to raise and stir up PLA sleepers, quote unquote, Chinese espionage activities, spy networks, ultimately raising issues against Vice President Sara Duterte and eventually leading to the extraordinary rendition of President Duterte to The Hague. So we're just helping everybody recall these things in early 2024. And the next slide, remember the PLA insignia that they made brouhaha about, saying that this was discovered in the dormitories of the Pogo, including former ex-senators Lacson, commented in public that yes, there has been a record of PLA deep penetration agents, sleepers in the country. And of course, the celebrated and now forgotten Alice Go investigations, which claim that Alice Go, the next slide, is confirmed as a spy by Xi Zhejiang, ex-cellmate of somebody, a Chinese national, detained in Bangkok, Thailand prison, which of course after a few months is completely forgotten. Nothing is proven except the lingering idea that there is a spy network in the Philippines and so on. So this is part of the complex, long-term strategic anti-China propaganda and Psy-war operations that the Americans have been conducting. There were several so-called arrests of Chinese spies in the Philippines, but for example, in this following case, it was quickly disproved by the Chinese side when the allegations of the NBI were examined. The so-called espionage operation of a Chinese citizen in the Philippines is based on speculation and accusation, according to the embassy of the PROC. The Chinese embassy in the Philippines has expressed concerns to the Philippine side and requested for consular visit to the said Chinese citizen so as to provide consular assistance. The family of the Chinese citizen in custody approached the embassy with concern about his safety and fair treatment, and so on. Okay. So this is, of course, the position of the Chinese embassy in one of the cases. But the next slide I prepared shows how some simple, basic, reasonable police steps were short-circuited by the National Bureau of Investigation, such as the so-called identity of a PLA agent, People's Liberation Agent, based on what the NBI claims is the name found in a PLA website. Unfortunately, when examined by the Chinese embassy, it was revealed that the name does not confirm the same person that was arrested by the NBI. The same pinyin sounding name, sounding family name or surname, but totally different characters and totally two different people. Let me just Qing, Deng Yanqing, and Deng Yanqing. Qing. As you can see in our alphabet, there is none, but in Chinese characters, the first one means clear, while the second one means celebration. So, on this weak basis of just a character name in the PLA website, the NBI arrests some parties which turns out to be innocent and not at all associated with the name in the PLA website. So these are just exercises of the NBI to just create sensational news about spy networks, which eventually they forget about and nothing is heard about anymore. Another case is the one I am showing next. The case of 4 Chinese nationals arrested by the Bureau of Immigration, Chinese spies. It turns out later that these so-called Chinese spies have lived in the Philippines for decades. And why do they arrest them now only after decades of being in the Philippines? Because this is a period when they're trying to create the anti-China scare. So these cases seems to have been the last straw on the rest of, as the arrest of the 3 Filipinos in Hainan followed close to this. All throughout the past 2 years of intrigues against China, the Department of Foreign Affairs had been bypassed on many issues. De-escalation agreements disregarded, and the political vendetta against Vice President Sara Duterte and escalated to a of former President Rodrigo R. Duterte. All the while, the public order and security institutions have been increasingly distracted from their sworn duty of maintaining peace and order in the nation. The NBI chasing witches, while the Philippine National Police has been distracted in politicized tasks such as arresting Koloy, PNP Chief General Marbil downplaying the severity of the drug use, of the drug scourge, and General Torre manhandling President Duterte's entourage, while the Remulias in the DOJ carry out operations such as Pogo politics and operations against political targets such as former President Rodrigo R. Duterte. And lately, of course, the last interview of Teresita Angsi of Kaisa regarding the attempt by the Philippine National Police to divert attention from the kidnapping of Ke. I forget the first name of Ke. What's his name? Adrian Ke, and to try to retell the story as a Pogo, maybe Adrian Ke, we'll check later, no problem. To try to portray it as a Pogo vendetta when it still actually is a kidnap case. So it is no wonder that the protection of the people and maintenance of peace and order is no longer capable of being performed by the country's police and security agencies. Yes. Okay, that's from Teresita Angsi. No basis at all. This just show the ineptness of the PNP, the police. They are victimizing the family all over again. Haven't they suffered enough? Kabobohan talaga ng mga police to divert attention from their ineptness. Well, ineptitude is one, and also diversion of their attention from their primary mission of maintaining peace and order
To serve and protect.
and to serve the people and secure the nation. They have been diverted, they have been politicized heavily by the BBM administration. And this is not only an isolated aspect of the BBM administration, but it is part and parcel of the entire misgovernance and collapse of the moral, ethical foundation of the government. So, as Pagdinawan earlier explained, we don't know if the nation will survive another year of this government. So we are calling upon our conscientious members of the national security community in the Philippines, and of course, the already enlightened, awakened citizenry to come together and institute change in Philippine society. Yeah, you're okay. The men in uniform. Okay. So it's 10 o'clock, 10 quarter. And are there other questions? And also our Zoom link, any links that any participant in the Zoom link, Jade Sheehan from CMG is with us. No other,
Do we have
participant?
any questions from the audience from Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Zoom regarding the just given presentation about the breakdown of national order, kidnappings, and deals of the spy? Okay, we have one.
What's
Good
this?
morning to all from Facebook, Lex Anchieta. Saan po ba talaga located ang mga 17 or 25, however so many EDCA bases?
Can you flash any slide, Joshua? EDCA bases?
So, saan po po talaga located ang mga 17 or 25 EDCA bases?
Well, what we know immediately right now is, of course, in Tuguegarao, in Cagayan Province, Lalo, I'm saying, Lalo,
Okay.
and,
Cebu.
well, of course, Cebu. Cagayan, there are two. Isabela, there's one. We'll flash, Ka Joshua is searching for some maps to project. No? And let me see, ready na ba? Of course, in Cagayan de Oro, there's the Lumbia Air Base. There it is. Lalo Airport in Tuguegarao, Cagayan Province, Camp Melchor de la Cruz. Is that the one in Lalo, Fort Magsaysay? Lalo Airport, Naval Base Camilo Osia, Santa Ana, Cagayan, Camp Melchor de la Cruz, Gamu, Isabela, Fort Magsaysay, Cabanatuan, Nueva Ecija, Basa Air Base, San Fernando, Pampanga, Benito Buen Air Base, Cebu City, Lumbia Air Base, Cagayan de Oro, Antonio Bautista Air Base in Puerto Princesa, Palawan, Balabac Island in Palawan. Now, these are the 9 formal U.S. bases. Even Senator Amy Marcos has mentioned more than that.
25 targets.
Targets and sub-bases that some consider as already U.S. bases. So this is what we can show. Let me see. Okay, and any other questions? Yeah, Chris.
Hindi ko lang sa yung opinion niyo kasi given yung recent kidnapping incident, recently nagpalabas si Chief PNP ng statement na sinasabi, pinalalala ng social media ang crime rate. When in fact, as he said, mababa o bumababa ang crime rate as per date data.
Yeah.
Base sa kanilang data, bumababa ang crime rate. At sinisisi ang social media o yung mga vloggers na nag-create doon ng scenario na mga faking crime incident para pabagsakin o pasamain ng imahe ng
Well, maybe I'll ask our young colleague to respond to that, and then we can add later on kami nito.
Okay, thank you, Kamintong. I think the problem kasi or the blind spot with yung crime data with the PNP is reported yun self-reported. Maraming mga krimen ang nangyayari na hindi reported. So it doesn't necessarily mean na bumaba nga yung crime rate of reported crimes. Pero hindi na-report ng mga krimen, doesn't take into account. So medyo weak yung pagsisin na sa mga vloggers kasi yung social media ngayon in real time nagre-report yung crime. Maraming nag-video ng crime as of the moment pero hindi na pa na-blatter. Hindi ibig sabihin na hindi nangyari yun or fake news yung nangyaring crime. For example, meron isang congressman, wag na natin pangalanin kasi medyo masensitive sila. Sinabi niya na yung recent kidnapping incident, hindi dapat daw basehan na tumataas daw yung crime rate. Pero unang-una hindi lang isa, 12 beginning from this year. And second of all, I think medyo insensitive yan sa mga nakidnap or yung isa namatay. So,
ang imbestigahan ng ating Philippine National Police because they are reporting that there is a 23% decrease in the crime rate. baka ito ay decreased in the reporting of crimes. Bakit ko nasabi ito? Matapos ng KOJC compound siege ni Nicolas Torre, which was very celebrated. No? It went on for almost a month. And then, itong kidnapping ni Presidente Duterte. Kung meron ka bang krimen na i-report sa pulis, hindi ba mag-iisip ka, bakit ka pa i-report to sa mga pulis?
Kaya,
Eh, mga pulis ang kriminal. Hindi ba? Baka mamaya, kung ano ba mangyari sa atin? So kung maliitin lang ang, hindi katulad ng panahon na pinakikita ni Duterte na ang law enforcement agencies ay nagre-responde sa mga reklamo ng tao ukol sa mga krimen. Ngayon, sino ang nasa tamang bayat? Matapos itong pagpatay dito sa isang Chinese, nalalapit ka pa sa pulis. Pulis. Titing matulis. Di ba? Para yan yung yung ginagawa sa ating mga kabataan. Pag hindi ka nakinig sa akin, tatawag ako ng pulis. Ha? So, ang ayusin ni Marbil ay ang kanyang sariling kapulisan. At baka kailangan mag-resign na siya. Bakit? Bakit ko nasabing dapat mag-resign na si Marbil? Nung tanongin si Nicolas Torre sa third hearing, sino ang nag-utos sa iyo na isakay sa aeroplano ang dating presidente? Sabi ni Torre, ang chief po ng Philippine National Police. Kidnapping yun eh. Ha? Tinanong mo ngayon si Marbil. Mr. Marbil, totoo ba ito? Tinuro niya ngayon si Alcantara. At sinabi ni Alcantara, hindi po ako nagbigay sa content. Bumalik kay Marbil. Ang tanong, at ang sagot ni Marbil ay invoking executive privilege. Alam mo, pag in-invoke mo ang executive privilege, ibig sabihin may kinalaman si Marcos. So para na rin ang tinurong at sinabi ni si Presidente Marcos ho ang nag-utos sa akin. Kung ang Pangulo ng Pilipinas ang utak ng isang kidnapping at ang kanyang Chief of Police, ang taong nagsagawa nito in broad daylight, even using a military facility. Ibig sabihin, may kooperasyon din dito ang Armed Forces of the Philippines. Kaya hindi pwedeng maghugas kamay at mag-Poncio Pilato dito si Kibo Teodoro. This is a coordinated action ng mga uniformed personnel. Sino pa ang lalapit sa pulis? Ano ang katibayan ko? Ang katibayan ko ay 15% na lamang ng taong bayan ngayon ang may pro-sentiment sa ating gobyerno. In other words, kung meron kayong gustong maging aksyon, huwag kayong lalapit sa gobyerno, huwag kayong lalapit sa any of the law enforcement agencies, NBI included, na invento ng mga espiya. Bakit ako lalapit? Either tumahimik na lang ako, O isang kamay ko na lang. Gusto kong gawin. Pangatlo, pati print media, pati mainstream media, niloloko nila tungkol dito sa pagkamatay ni Anson K. na ito daw revenge killing at related sa Pogo. Kaya pati ito si Teresita Amse ay umiinit ang ulo. Dahil isang mabuting Filipino-Chinese, inaako sa kanila na kasama sa isang criminal syndicate. In other words, nag-iimbento sila ng narrative. Pangapat, ang ating National Security Agency, si Eduardo Ano, who is our chief spy. Walang alam tungkol sa nangyayari mga krimen, tungkol dito sa mga espiya nito. Bakit hindi alam to niya ng ating chief spy? At mukhang walang alam ang ating chief spy. Mas marunong pa sa kanya si John Vic Remulla na nagsabi na kasabwat siya sa kidnapping ng ating dating Pangulo. So, wala nang tiwala talaga ang ating sambayanan dito sa presidente na ito, dito sa gobyerno na ito. We are close to anarchy. So, hindi na dapat pagdebatihan itong pagbaba o pagtaas ng krimen. Dahil klaro-klaro, from the president up to the highest officials of this land, in broad daylight, they're engaged. Tatlong aspeto yung ginawa nila kay Duterte. Illegal arrest, illegal detention, and extrajudicial rendition or kidnapping. Tapos hihingi sila ng tiwala sa taong bayan. Aba, hindi na ako nagtataka, sumisikat ang mga katulad ng mga tulpo. Doon na tayo kay tulpo magsumbong. Hindi ba? Bakit pa tayo sa pulis magsusumbong? Kay tulpo na lang tayo magsumbong. Iparas na lang natin kay paras.
Mas mabuti pa yung iparas kay paras. Pero ang mga tulpo ay manloloko din. Yun ang problema. Manloloko din. Nadadagdagan ko lang. Meron kang sasabihin. Sige, sure.
Thank you, Kamento. I share Ado's view that there's been not only a breakdown of national order, but a breakdown of trust with the PNP. How can the people trust the Philippine National Police when you have a PNP chief which downplays the use of drugs? How can you trust the PNP, the Philippine National Police, when they put out news reports na bumaba daw yung krimen? The news reports are inundated with laugh reactions, haha emojis. People don't believe the news na bumaba na yung national crime rate, na cleared na daw yung mga barangay sa bansa of drugs. Kasi kaliwat kanan yung kidnapping, kaliwat kanan yung tanimbala, so much so yung mga bags sa airport, they're now sealed in plastic. Kasi people, they if they really believe yung mga pinagsasabi ng PNP na bumaba yung crime rate, edi they wouldn't do that, no? Ngayon, yung phenomenon na front packs, yung mga backpacks ng tao, sinusot nila in front of their chest kasi natatakot sila, pati mga ordinaryong minimum wage earner, dupot yung cellphone or yung wallet. So, yun lang po. There is not only just a breakdown of national order, but a breakdown of trust in the police, because the former President Duterte there was a violation in how they implemented the arrest. They should not have surrendered him. We are not a member of the International Criminal Court. And if they wanted to do so, they should have brought him first to the Pasay Regional Trial Court. They didn't do so. So the police who's supposed to implement the law were themselves violating the law. So that's why there's a breakdown of trust.
Well, ang may dadagdag ko lang talaga ay masabi kay Marbil, talagang wala ng kredibilidad kayo at ang gobyernong ito at yung mga kasangkot ng gobyernong ito tulad ng mainstream media Kaya sa social media na umaasa ang taong bayan dito sa kanilang paghahanap ng katotohanan sa mga pangyayari at kitang-kita naman nila sa sariling mga buhay po nila. Samantalang ang mga dyaryo po ay halos araw-araw nasa front page yung West Philippine Sea issue puno. Pero paulit-ulit naman sa lahat ng mga surveys, binibigkas po ng mamamayan na ang problema nila hindi yung so-called West Philippine Sea. Ang problema nila ay yung presyo ng bilihin, trabaho, kriminalidad, corruption at itong mga to, which occupies the mind of at least 93% of the population at hindi yung 5 to 7% na inaatupag na ni Tariela na West Philippine Sea issue. So simula po dyan, nadagdagan na yung ating mga nabanggit na kaso na panlalabag ng mga karapatang pantao ng gobyerno na pinapalabas police action, yung aresto kay KOJC Pastor Kibuloy, yung kidnap kay Presidente Duterte, yung pagtutuligsa sa Kongreso laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte na hindi naman pinaniniwalaan ng tao, pero dinadala po ng mainstream media, dinadala po ng kongresista, mga senador at ng Malacanang. Kaya po nawawalan sila ng kredibilidad at naghahanap ng ibang sources ng informasyon ng sambayanan at pumupunta po sa social media para marinig yung ibang mga storyang hindi nilalabas ng otoridad at ng mainstream media. So, yan ay given reality na po, no, na sa social media na umaasa ang taong bayan. Halimbawa, yung aking naulat kanina, batay sa ulat ni Harry Roque, na nung siya ay tinanggal sa Philippine Star, yung kanyang social media na kanyang pinaglagyan ng kanyang column ay nakakita ng 14 milyong views. Na hindi po in any stretch of the imagination makukuha po ng Philippine Star. So, yan po ang reality today. Kaya din po tayo ay umaasa po sa social media primarily sa ating mga broadcast, sa ating mga presentasyon ng ating mga policy papers po. So with that, anything else from the GTNR Facebook? Ultimo real data ng crime rate, dinudoktor pa rin nila ngayon. Hindi inuulat ng wasto sa publiko. Okay, so from Facebook and from YouTube, wala yung ating mga Zoom viewers from... kasi yung iba naninibago sa Sabadong schedule natin po. No? So,
Can I add something to my statement?
sige.
Yes.
Pangalawa, sino ba nagkocontrol ng mga law enforcement agencies natin ngayon? Ano ba ang mga law enforcement agencies natin ngayon? Simulan natin sa pagpasok ng mga banyaga. Bureau of Immigration. Saan ilalim yan? Department of Justice. NBI. Itong mga nag-iimbento ng China spy narratives. NBI. Saan nagre-report yan? Yung Office of the Prosecutor General. Kanino nagre-report yan? Sinasabi nila na ang pinasa sa kanila ni Duterte na kaso ng mga drug-related cases ay 7,732. Nung tanongin ko ano estado ng mga kaso, hindi malaman nung Undersecretary of Justice. Isa lamang doon sa 7,732 ang nakarating yata sa korte at na-desisyon na ng husgado, ito yung kay Kian de los Santos. So walang ginagawa ang Department of Justice. Maliwanag na maliwanag. Nagkaroon ng problema sa Pogo, ilang daan. Inaakusahan nila mga espiya. Bakit wala ni isa? Hiniharap sila sa husgado. Within 48 hours, immediately, diniport nila yung hundreds of Chinese workers. Bakit? Natatakot ba sila na baka may sabihin itong mga ito? Sino ang head ng Department of Justice? Si Ginoong Boying Remulla. Punta tayo sa kabilang dako. Ano ang pinakamalawak na law enforcement agency sa Pilipinas? Philippine National Police. Dahil sabi ni Gibo Teodoro, hindi raw law enforcement agency ang Armed Forces of the Philippines. Kanino under ang Philippine National Police? Kay John Vic Remulla. Ano relasyon ni Boying Remulla kay John Vic Remulla? Kapatid. Ito ba yung mga Remulla na na-involve sa pagbibenta ng koblanja sa isang grupo ng mga pogo na pinamumunahan ni Kim Wong? Oo. Hindi ba gaming yon? Hindi ba sakop ng factor yun? Oo. Meron bang kamag-anak si Boying at si John Vic Remulla sa regulator ng gambling dito sa Pilipinas? Meron. Si Director Gilbert Remulla. Aba, kung talagang meron tayong tatanungin tungkol sa Pogo pala, mga Remulla ang dapat natin tanungin. Bakit nagkagulo ang Pogo nung pagpasok ni Presidente Duterte? At hindi ito napigil hanggat hindi umalis si Benhar Abalos sa gabinete para tumakbong senador at palitan ni John Vic Remulla. Dahil ang may control ng PNP noon ay si Benhar Abalos at ang assignment niya, di umano, ay proteksyonan yung si Rainier Chu sa norte at dito naman sa Katimugan, mga Remulla ang in charge sa Katimugan. Ito ay mga kwento-kwento na nakakalat ngayon. Wala silang sinasabi tungkol dito. Pero maliwanag na kontrolado nila ang lahat ng law enforcement agencies dito sa Pilipinas. Bakit nila kailangan kontrolin ang lahat ng law enforcement agencies dito sa Pilipinas? At tanong ko lang, at ang sa pantaha ko, ay dahil kilala nila ang mga tunay na kriminal na kumikilos dito sa ating bansa. Kung ang isang pamilya na nakakabinete ni Bongbong Marcos ang may kontrol ng lahat ng law enforcement dito sa Pilipinas, aba, mag-iisip ako. Ha? Ano ang gusto talaga? Ano ang agenda behind this? Bakit ginawa ni Marcos to? At kung hindi alam ni Marcos ang consequences ng ginawa niya, siguro dito sa pagkidnap sa presidente, dating presidente Rodrigo Duterte, maintindihan na niya na yung katabi niyang si John Vic Remulla ay hindi dapat pagkatiwalaan sa anumang responsibilidad sa gobyerno at so anumang impormasyon na involve ang gobyerno. Bakit? Aba, ay siya ang unang kumanta. Nakikipaglandian pa siya kay Pinky Webb. Oh. I think there was, chemistry. She was, so, John Vic Remulla sang like a canary. At lahat ng mga sinabi niya doon ay pwedeng gamitin ebidensya sa isang korte laban sa kanya at laban sa mga kasanggan niya sa krimeng naganap. Yan ang nakikita ng taong bayan ngayon. The, 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 the people is seeing a cabinet in shambles. Yung pera natin sa finance, ginajaggle-jaggle. Hindi na malaman kung nasaan. PhilHealth funds, hindi na tuloy. Anong nasa Manila Times na isang araw? In order daw ni Marcos na miski na walang budget ang PhilHealth, kailangan dahil marami rin nagreklamo na ang liit ng mga coverage nila. Gumagastos ng milyon-milyon. Wala pa raw 15,000 ang coverage ng PhilHealth. So mga ibang mga karamdaman at merong hindi binayaran. By the way, kayo na makakaroon ng karamdaman, huwag kayong mag-expect na bayaran kayo ng PhilHealth sa hospitalization pag hindi kayo na-admit ng more than 24 hours. Dahil mayroon palang provision sa PhilHealth na pagka ikaw ay na-admit at less than 24 hours, hindi babayaran ng PhilHealth yung hospital. O yan, kami na nag-a-announce sa taong bayan. Ang turismo, pinagmamalaki. Ang laki daw ng kontribusyon sa ating GDP. Samantalang alam naman natin na 24% short siya ng target for 2024. 5,500 flood control projects hindi makita. Tulay, bumabagsak. Si Engineer Marcos pa ang nagsabi, due to design flaw. Samantalang, nung tanungin yung tunay na engineer, si Engineer Cañete, ang sabi niya, aba, ay dinoble pa nga namin. From 27 tons to 54 tons ang carrying capacity niya. Ang problema, nagpadaan kayo ng isang 10-wheeler truck na may kargang 102 tons. Aba, miski naman London Bridge will fall down. Pagkaganyan ang usapan. Hindi na usapang matino ito eh. And I could go on and on to each department. Trade, walang may present na increase in exports and investments. I can go on and on and on and on and on. And as I go on and on, walang makita ang taong bayan na accomplishment itong administrasyon na ito. Pero puro kapalpakan. Inimbang, ngunit kulang. Thank you, Kamento.
Okay. Danny, I think pwede na tayo mag-close. Ano? No other questions? Okay, Danny, let's close.
Okay. Thank you, Kado.
Teka, meron dito From statute daw, does that apply to the rest of
I think we can talk this loud.
Ito, accordingly, sabi ni Patatotini, the Rome Statute does not apply to the arrest of PRRD, maybe Romula Statute. Anyway, may konting sarcasm, pero sagutin natin yung issue. Ang issue po dito kasi, yung sagot ng ating butihing Department of Justice Secretary ay surrender ang ginawa niya. At sinopla naman siya ni former Associate Justice Ascuna, Adolfo Ascuna, na nagsabi,
Yes.
no, na paano mo, effectively itong sinabi ni Ascuna, bakit mo isusurrender ang isang tao sa isang body na hindi mo na nire-recognize? So, the Ascuna statement was reducing the Remulla statement to absurdity. Kasi sabi ni Remulla, sinurrender daw niya. At dito, pinapangalandakan niya that the Department of Justice is the competent judicial authority at hindi na kailangang iharap sa korte. Nakalimutan niya ang sequence of events. Alam niyo, ang problema dito sa mga abogadong nagpipresent ng mga technicalities who are arguing on the basis of technicalities ay nagpapalusot. Ano ang analysis dito? Hindi ba si Marcos mismo ang nagsabi sa press conference na isinurrender si dating Pangulong Presidente sinakay sa aeroplano hindi dahil sa ICC action kundi sa request ng Interpol? Lumabas na yung warrant of arrest ng Interpol was only disseminated to all the law enforcement agencies through a diffusion request. There was no red notice from Interpol. What is coming out now is that the Interpol has no participation whatsoever in this process. Why? Because the diffusion notice was not presented to its General Secretariat, and its General Secretariat did not come out with a red notice. Therefore, walang aksyon on the part of the Interpol. Yung dissemination ng diffusion request by the ICC to all the law enforcement agencies is FYI, for your information. Pero, assuming there was a red notice, assuming that the diffusion request is enforceable, the ultimate destination of either one of them, assuming for the sake of argument that there was a red notice, is only a provisional arrest. You arrest, provisional. Ano ang next step? Ini-invoke nila ang Republic Act 9851. Pero sa pag-invoke nila ng Republic Act 9851, hindi nila minimension yung portion na nakasabi doon pursuant to extradition laws and treaty. Sinasabi lang nila surrender or extradite. Pero hindi nila binabasa yung qualifying clause pursuant to extradition laws and treaty. So ngayon lamang, nang pumasok si Ascuna, naipasok yun sa konsiderasyon. Ngayon palang debate, surrender or extradite, does not end there. It's not a choice between A or B. But whether it's A or B, pursuant pa rin sa extradition law and treaty. At klarong-klaro sa extradition law natin, na nilimbag pa ni Ferdinand Marcos Sr., Presidential Decree 1069, na ang destination niyan is, nakalagay doon, Court of First Instance pa nga eh. Pero naging regional trial court na yan eh. Ano ang final judicial value ng 1089? The court shall have the exclusive power to hear and decide on the case. Alright? So yun. Yan ang mga iniiwasan nilang mga local laws. Sinabi ni Remulla, kasi hindi na natin nire-recognize ang Rome Statute at ICC. Ha? Eh, tinanong siya ngayon. Hindi na pala natin nire-recognize. Bakit nyo sinuko? Kumambyo si Rimulya. Ang base daw na international humanitarian law. Basahin nyo nga international humanitarian law. It is only applicable in times of war, gera. Ano ba naging gera? Can you classify the drug war as a crime? As a war?
No.
Well, war crimes against humanity are prevalent? Hindi. So, ginajumble-jumble nila ngayon, nililito-lito nila. Unfortunately, ang suspecha ko, ito si Jaime Marcos, may IQ ng over 160. Matalino itong senador na ito. Hindi nila malito-lito. Kaya ngayon, lumalabas. Pati ngayon si is turning to be a witness for the state. Si Nicolas Torre. Tinuro na niya si Marbil. Sabi ko nga kanina, that who gave him the order. In the process, while Rodrigo Duterte was detained in the Villamor Air Base, a military facility that is under the Armed Forces of the Philippines, that is under the supervision of the Secretary of Defense. Was there any Interpol personality? Wala. Pagsakay ni Presidente Duterte sa aeroplano, he is supposed to be turned over to an Interpol entity. Pero bang Interpol entity nag-receive kay Presidente Duterte? Wala. Interpol ang magdadala sa kanya sa The Hague para siya isuko, i-turn over sa ICC. Kasi yun ang sabi ni Marcos. Isiniuko ko, hindi dahil sa ICC, kundi dahil sa Interpol. Pero meron isang, ewan ko kung ano ito, ang tatawag dito sa kulokoy na ito. May isang special envoy na gumanap sa function Interpol. Sila Kanilaw, si Marcos Kanilaw, na nung tanungin si Alcantara, ano man daw sila kinalaman doon. So, itinurnover ni Nicolas Torre sa aeroplano kay Marcos Kanilaw si Duterte. Si Marcos Kanilaw is an impostor. Wala siyang authority from the Interpol. He is not in any way connected with the Interpol or could act in behalf of the Interpol. And sa kasukdulan na kapalpakan, mali-mali pa yung entry niya doon sa information sheet, turning over the former president to the ICC. In one specific question, tinanong ko, alam niya may karamdaman ba ito? O ano? Sabi niya, do not know. At any rate, mga kabansa, balik tayo sa ating pinag-uusapan kanina. Kung ganito ka-brazen, kung ganito ka-gaspang, ang pagpapatupad ng hindi naman batas para lamang may taguyod ang kanilang intensyones na politikal. They have politicized the NBI, they have politicized the Coast Guard, they have politicized the Bureau of Immigration, they have politicized the Philippine National Police, they have politicized everything. At ngayong nahuli sila scot-free, ba dapat sila naghuhugas lahat ng kamay? Kaya kami, sa mamamayang ayaw sa digmaan, we are firm in our belief na walang mangyayari sa ating bansa heretofore unless the malignant cancer in our society, the debilitating disease in our government, and the incompetent and perhaps incapacitated president is excised from our midst and replaced by someone who can run this country properly in the 21st century and who will not be merely a proxy to the war intents of a foreign country, but for the sake of the people, for economic cooperation with countries that are involved in peaceful development. Kung ayaw nyo ng China, then let's approach Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and the 5 or 6 other members of the BRICS. Bakit? Wala ho tayong makukuhang economic sa Amerika. They are saving themselves first. Eh nalulunod ang Amerika. Kakapit pa tayo sa Amerika. Ano ho ba ang leksyon sa swimming? Pag may nalulunod, mag-ingat ka. Huwag kang basta kakapit dahil baka ikaw ang maspok. Ikaw ang malunod at mamatay. So yan mga kabansa. Let us choose our friends and choose our friends carefully. We don't have to become pro this or that, anti this or that. That is not the agenda. The agenda is saan tayo dadalhin itong kausap natin. Di ba? Nung panahon ni Duterte, despite the COVID-19, nakaramdam tayo ng panandaliang comfort zone. Comfort. Ano sabi ni Duterte? All I can promise the Filipino people is a little bit better, to live a little bit more comfortable in their lives. Naramdaman niyo ba yun nung panahon ni Duterte? Kung ang sagot niyo ay no, then mabuti nga, nasa ICC na siya. Pero kung ang sagot niyo ay yes, we have to bring him home.
Yes.
Yan po ang aking huling salita.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kado. And with that, I'd like to close today's forum on that note. Thank you to everyone who joined us in this forum, in YouTube, on Facebook, and in Zoom, and everyone who will join us in the future watching the replay. Thank you to Kamento and Kado, our speakers, and the audience. Yeah, bring him home. We have to bring PRRD back home. Thank you.